As we are now in the holiday season and the tides of winter are being heralded by the fae known as Mariah Carey, I get drawn to certain comfy things. The Lord of the Rings is chief among them. All the films, their special features, and the books themselves are just so cozy and comforting to me. But in addition, Lord of the Rings video games, and especially the Lord of the Rings Online, or LOTRO for short, is to me as near cozy a game can get. The world of Middle-earth in LOTRO is so lovingly detailed, with care put into every corner. The feeling of walking around the Shire, Bree, or Rivendell still fills me with a sense of both calm and wonder. The scale and vision of these places are beautiful. You get immersed into these simple lives and get slowly convinced of why this is a world worth fighting for. Both from the people, but also as you explore the landscape. The serene forests, the crystal clear lakes, the rolling farmlands. The world itself is good. And through that, you see why Tolkien and the narrative cared so deeply about it. And as you venture through the corrupted zones controlled by the enemies of the Free Peoples, you get to see and experience what the promise of a rule under Sauron is. Taking the world, something that is inherently untamable, and trying to enslave it to his will. Warping beauty and nature into soulless industry and malformed order. You begin to hate it, but not the stupid, burning hatred of evil. More so, you feel the righteous justice of wishing universal wrongs to be corrected. This leads into something that is, to me, a constant comfortable driving force in LOTRO, which is that no matter what goal I'm working towards in the game, I, for the most part, feel what I am doing in the game is good. And while I absolutely love morally gray stories and characters, and indeed I would say that I tend to prefer them, there is undeniably a nice feeling to the idea of an indisputable hero in a setting, where every orc slain, every bandit stronghold conquered, and every scheming traitor exiled is a real action that will echo throughout the world, changing it for the better. You can have that feeling of fixing, or at least fighting against evil. You feel through LOTRO that your actions are truly just. And in a world where it feels that these evil forces are inexorable and inconquerable, it is a valuable experience to have that fantasy. This is something that Tolkien himself understood. There is a famous quote often confused for his, in which it is said, "Fantasy is escapist, and that is its glory." This is actually a quote from Ursula K. Le Guin, who is another author that I love, but regardless, Tolkien said something similar. What he said was instead this, taken from his essay on fairy stories. I have claimed that escape is one of the main functions of fairy stories, and since I do not disapprove of them, it is plain that I do not accept the tone of scorn or pity with which escape is now so often used. A tone for which the uses of the word outside literary criticism give no warrant at all. In what the misusers are fond of calling real life, escape is evidently, as a rule, very practical. It may even be heroic. In real life it is difficult to blame it, unless it fails. In criticism, it would seem to be the worse the better it succeeds. Evidently, we are faced by a misuse of words, and also by a confusion of thought. Why should a man be scorned if, finding himself in prison, he tries to get out and go home, or if, when he cannot do so, he thinks and talks about other topics than jailers and prison walls? The world outside has not become less real because the prisoner cannot see it. In using escape in this way, the critics have chosen the wrong word. And, what is more, they are confusing, not always by sincere error, the escape of the prisoner with the flight of the deserter. J.R.R. Tolkien. This essay is a goldmine for understanding Tolkien's views on fantasy, literature, and even just the world. If I could, I'd quote minutes upon minutes of it, and his arguments in defense of fantasy, both for fantasy's help in healing emotions in the mind, but also as a tool to view someone or something that would usually be outside of our own life's experiences and even possibilities. And while I can enjoy debates on the ethics of Lord of the Rings, and things like orcs and their implications, I feel that, frankly, Lord of the Rings doesn't need these debates. It is primarily an escapist heroic fantasy, and trying to pick apart any of the goodness presented in its narrative is missing the point. Aragorn's tax policy doesn't matter for the purposes of the story and world. It shouldn't be a thing that we should even entertain caring about. And yes, in the real world most things are cloaked in shades of grey, and I will not argue that. And in real life people can oftentimes upsettingly view the world in black and white, and that can be very bad and destructive. And so to have a story to find comfort in something that is impossible in the real world, black and white, is worth celebrating. and it is a valuable experience that only art can give us. And while I love Tolkien's darker stories like The Children of Húrin, Lord of the Rings is most famous for a good reason, and it is because he wished to focus on a story that is primarily about good people doing good things. People who loved each other openly, people who loved their world, people who had idealism and hope for it, and oftentimes even having to make the hard choice to persevere in the absence of hope. And these things are beautiful. They are the human experience. It is so easy to be overwhelmed by the evil of the world, by loss, by the hatred directed at you and others, but I think it is so important to have hope for the world, and a goal that is greater than what is maybe possible. In a world where we are constantly bombarded by evils every day, it is not only fine but good to have the escapism of heroes. And luckily, video games are a great medium for experiencing this, allowing you the ability to experience this escapism firsthand, to not only admire the hero, but be the hero. And in a time where I desperately crave and want cozy feelings, LOTRO is the perfect choice for being a cozy hero, even if only for a short time, or a really fucking long one. I knew when I started this channel that I eventually wanted to talk about LOTRO, but the game is far too massive to cover in one go, so I feel the need to narrow down the scope. And what I've decided on, in keeping with the cozy feeling of the season, is I want to go through the different origin zones of the game. These origins I find super comforting, due to their low-level nature as well as, of course, the nostalgia. I also find the beginnings of stories tend to be my favorites. They set up everything else to come, and that feeling of being ousted from mundanity to something extraordinary is a great one. In LOTRO, when you choose your race, you're given a unique opening scenario I'm going to refer to as Origins, because, well, they frankly remind me a lot of one of my favorite games, Dragon Age Origins. These Origins are unique scenarios that are oftentimes hours long, and directly influence the rest of the surrounding zones, giving every race a different early game experience that will also, even if the player doesn't realize it, immerse them into the roles of their characters. To immediately have a unique experience as, say, a dwarf or a hobbit that others wouldn't have makes the world, your character, and your own lens to see that world feel that much more real. I'm going to discuss these different origin zones, their aesthetics, and the feeling of going through them. For each of these origins, I'll be roleplaying a character, giving them a basic backstory and some motivation. They will also all be using different classes, meaning that my gameplay probably won't be the best in this video since I've only ever reached high level with one class, the champion. I'll be focused mostly on recounting the story, but I'll also be lightly reviewing the game. When I started this video, I planned to do every origin in one go, but that's not possible. Each origin quest line up until the first main quest is around 15 hours if you're skipping a lot of side content. So, for this first video I'll be playing through the human origin only. However, I do plan to go through all of them, and already have the next part filmed, but I kinda want to get this video out before the end of the year to keep my cozy preamble, so some downsizing was required. Anyways, let's get into it. I wanted to start with the origin zone I have the most experience with, and back in the day when I first got the game and begged my mom to buy me the big Mines of Moria box, I played a human Aragorn clone, since Aragorn was, and to be frankly honest, still is my hero. So I'll be playing as a human. But for this human, I'm not going to be going with an Aragorn clone, and instead I'm going to go with a class I've never tried before, the Warden, a spear and shield combo who's described in the lore as being border watchmen who fight back against encroaching beasts and bandits. I figured what made the most sense for me was to have this Warden be a man from Rohan, defending the large but disorganized kingdom's borders. This Warden's name is Fenrain. He grew up in the border marches of the Westfold, on one of many loosely connected farms. Ever since he was young, he had proven to be good with nature, and would often venture to nearby settlements, and eventually even past the borders of the kingdom. When he was in his early teens on one of his adventures, he spotted an approaching raiding party of Dunlendings, wild men who despised Rohirrim. He snuck close to their camp and got a head count, and then rushed back home. He was able to warn the farmsteads in time to be ready. The Rohirrim mustered, and the farmers dusted off their old armor and spears and took to horseback, riding down the raiders before they had even got to a single farm. As he grew into adulthood, this tale of his heroism, as well as his general penchant for exploration, drew the attention of his lord, who invited him to be a border warden. In his time, he has killed a small handful of wild beasts and even a few raiders. Just months ago, though, he fought a group of brigands who were holding up a family, but these brigands turned out to be just a small part of a larger raiding party. They got past his watch and killed a household who struggled. taking their few belongings and fleeing north on stolen horses. In the body of one of the ones he had killed, he found a sigil with the markings of Angmar, a kingdom his lord had only ever heard of within legend. With his lord's blessing, he left his watch to pursue these bandits to the north, and learn what this sigil and their act of wanton violence meant. He hated leaving his home's borders behind, yet a small part of himself was also excited at seeing new lands. And most importantly, he felt a blood debt was to be paid for his failure. His journey has led him far from Rohan's borders, all the way to the outskirts of Breeland, where he learned the bandits and murderers of the region had begun grouping together, under the banner of a faction known as the Black Wolves. Fenrain was able to find one of their strongholds, but he tried to spy on them, he was taken unawares and knocked unconscious. This is where our story in the game itself begins.
A chance encounter with brigands upon the road leads to captivity. You awaken with the ranger Strider before you. As he urges you to act quickly, you realize you have become involved in matters much greater than yourself.
Fenrain wakes up in a cell, and who's there to save him but Strider himself? Several Black Wolves lay dead from his hand, and he quickly leads us through the halls, eventually passing us weapons. He explains that he's been in search of a hobbit, and so have the Black Wolves. But the foolish brigands have kidnapped the wrong duo. Still, he is here to save them and, by chance, also save us. He leaves to go look for the Dunedain ranger, named Amdir, and asks us to find the hobbits. After witnessing a Black Wolf fly, then killing several of them, Fenrain saves the hobbits. The first is Celandine Brandybuck, from the same family as Mary. She's a kind but also fiery woman. Literally. She leads us to the second hobbit, Mundo Sackville Baggins. The Black Wolves seem stupid enough to just take any Baggins, assuming that they were Frodo. Mundo sadly seems to fall into the stereotype of his Sackville Bagginses. He doesn't even thank us for saving him, instead just declaring it was about time. With the hobbits in tow, we try to leave through the main gates.
Back! Go back to the shadow, fallen king!
The ranger, Amdir, attempts to take on the Nazgul, but they stab him with a Morgul blade. Amdir collapses and the Nazgul slowly moves towards us, but has to flee as both Strider appears and the flames lit by Celandine engulf the entire area. With Strider, we take the wounded Amdir and the hobbits out of the encampment.
Wounded by a Black Rider, the ranger Amdir escaped with his charges into the wild, making his way back to the village of Archet.
There, Captain Brackenbrook, a retired sellsword, has allowed Strider and his companions to stay and take respite from their cares.
I love these narration segments that we get. It is also neat to have them function as a loading screen, so it really is just two birds, one stone. We also get narration for every story instance or main dungeon, usually from Gandalf in these early vanilla stages, but also from other chief characters as the game goes on. During the last scene of the opening, we were frozen with fear, cowering, witnessing what was happening. This happens many times throughout the main story, usually due to the Nazgul or some other great evil overwhelming us. Some people complain about this, but frankly I'm willing to put up with it to have the in-engine cutscenes. It's the same thing that Bethesda does occasionally. Besides, I believe that there's kind of a lore explanation for this. In the lore, there's the Nazgul's black breath, which overwhelms people with their evil, sometimes leading them to fall unconscious or even die from supernatural fear. My own personal headcanon is that, since we are of a heroic nature, we are somewhat resistant to it. Enough to not pass out at least, but still be frozen for a bit. Interestingly enough, our HP system in the game is also called morale, so instead of falling in battle, we retreat, which I feel kind of backs this up too. Archet, where we've ended up, is our proper tutorial zone, and what the game calls a layered one, meaning that the area can change greatly depending on what part of the main quest we're in. Archet is a perfect place to start. The town itself is beautiful and full of so much life. Even more modern MMOs do not usually have this amount of flavor and detail to them. We get to see the townsfolk chatting, trading, crafting, even shouting down from a second story or having a marital dispute in public. I love hubs in video games, and LOTRO has so many different villages, towns, and cities that are all this detailed and oftentimes more. Many from the books, some original, and some you'd recognize as being in the films too. Like Minas Tirith, which is absolutely insane in its scale and detail, and even featuring book details like the black outer wall and the farmlands around the city, probably being one of the biggest cities in gaming period. I'm under no illusion, however, and I can see that this game has aged, but I still maintain that good game design doesn't age, that the handcrafted feeling of this game remains and shines. The way this world is laid out is expertly done. You'll almost always be looking at something interesting, and oftentimes can see the next point of interest from where you are, even if it's miles away. It makes the world feel cohesive, but also still so large. It also feels really vertical. The hills and mountains feel real, just something a game in the Lord of the Rings setting absolutely needs to nail. In Archet, we get our bearings and are asked by Strider to take charge of the situation, since he needs to leave soon to find the actual halfling he is after before it's too late. But first, before he leaves, he asks us to speak to the leader of the town, as well as find Kingsfoil for Amdir's wound. It is funny to me how this and so many of the other stories here are almost fanfiction wish fulfillment. Aragorn famously asks Sam to look for Kingsfoil, it's a weed, and now here he is asking us to do the same thing. The leader of the town, Captain Brackenbrook, doesn't seem to understand the severity of the situation. He knows of the Black Wolves, they've been here for years, but they've never done more than thievery, and indeed he feels to attack them would be needless. We ask several of the townsfolk too, and they feel that the Black Wolves just aren't worth dealing with. I actually like this plot point a lot. Realistically, if a town is running fine and you have a small community where everyone knows each other, why would you want to fight a battle that will cause at least a few of the people you know personally to die? You wouldn't. There's some truth to be said for evilness, or at least stupidity and comfort. And Fenrain is definitely feeling this, since he's already now got to witness what brigands and outlaws are capable of back in Rohan. Regardless, Brackenbrook hasn't completely disregarded us. He gives us directions to find Kingsfoil by an old ruin, and asks us to speak to his most trusted man, Calder Cobb, and also, if we can, deal with some wolves in the area. Fenrain is happier about this. As a warden back in Rohan, he often did things like this. Wolves would pose no issue for him. When we meet Calder Cobb outside the town, he's immediately rude to us, calling us a rumor monger. So somehow word must have already gotten out of our encounter with the Black Wolves. He insists that the wolves and beasts are the only things assaulting Archet, and directs us to kill them atop the same nearby ruin that has the Kingsfoil. The ruin is beautiful. I know this isn't movie license, but it nails the feelings that Weathertop, Amon Hen, and the other ruins during the movies gave. This feeling of something great in the past now gone, but still a giant skeleton of it remains. They look majestic and powerful in the countryside. It also really helps tell the lore of the area, since at one point this was structures of a great kingdom, and ironically enough, one that Angmar itself had destroyed. After gathering the Kingsfoil and killing many wolves, we reach the top of the ruin, and find a strange, rough-hewn banner. A man appears, saying that Calder told him we'd be paying a visit, and attacks us. We easily kill him. Calder underestimated us. We return to Calder, and immediately he threatens us, saying the captain won't believe anything that we tell him, since they've been close since he was a boy. He even says that he would try and kill us now, if there wasn't another guard, Dirk Mudbrick, nearby. Fenrain at this point is furious. Back in Rohan, Fenrain would be trusted enough to take in Calder or even kill him if need be. But he was a stranger here. He was no warden of these lands, and as much as he wished to appeal to the other guard Dirk, he knew he wouldn't listen. So, Fenrain, much to his chagrin, forces himself to walk away and return to town. Strider with the Kingsfoil prepares a salve and debates what steps to take next. He learned that while we were away, a man in the stocks outside the prison was a Blackwold, and perhaps we could get him to admit to Calder's treachery. Even as we approach the man in the stockades, he says,
Oi, you there! Let me go! Calder Cobb can vouch for me!
When we tell him we know Calder is a traitor, he gets more serious, and says that soon he'll be free, and Fenrain will be the one in shackles. The jailer, overhearing this, is the first person in town to believe us, and he says to tell the captain that he has our backs, and will vouch for us, in thinking that the Black Wolves are a true threat. Finally, the captain takes what we're saying more seriously, and asks us to check on the southernmost farm in the bounds of Archet. If the Black Wolves are making a move, the farmer Cal Springley will know, since the gate in and out of the region is beside his farm. Again, I think this is a really good way to do the plotline. He still doesn't believe us 100%, but he's no longer being openly hostile and dismissive, and takes a logical step to get more information that a captain of this region would. Meanwhile, the hobbits ask us for help as well. Celandine asks us to find bilberries for a tea for Amdir, since it was an old brandybuck recipe for dealing with splinters when she was a kid. And Mundo demands we hunt down boars because he's hungry, still not thanking us for saving him. Funny how oblivious to the situation they still are. Fenrain is annoyed at Mundo, but is able to stifle his annoyance with Celandine, since she means well. Amdir, after all, does have a kind of splinter in him. On the way to Cal's farm, we do come across some boar for Mundo and spear them. Reaching the farm, we immediately know that something is awry. The farmers are all gathered around holding pitchforks. They explain that they were attacked by the Blackwolves, and want us to try and go for help in the nearby town of Combe. Before we leave, a farmhand named Will Wheatley asks us to look for his father and the other farmhands, who chased after the fleeing brigands. Fenrain vows to find them, and says that he will once he returns from Combe. That journey is ended short, however, as when Fenrain goes to the gates of Archet, he finds it is barricaded and held by a group of Blackwolves. Returning, the farm master writes a letter to Brackenbrook, vouching for us, saying the situation is dire. Fenrain tracks the farmhands and, sadly, finds them all dead, having been slain by the Blackwolves as they were overwhelmed the further away from the farm they got. Fenrain is angrily reminded of how he felt when he found the massacred homestead in Rohan. He finds a Blackwold member still by the river not far from a body, and kills them mercilessly. He had never before killed a human out of anger, only out of defense. He didn't like the feeling, but he still knew what he did was just. By the river were the bilberries that the hobbit asked for, so he gathered them quietly, washing the blood from his hands in the river stream first, shaking. Fenrain returned to the farmstead with the sad news. The young man Will vowed vengeance for his slaughtered father and friends. Fenrain wished he could tell him not to, but vengeance was what had led him all this way, so he knew he'd be a hypocrite if he said so. He nodded in understanding and returned to Archet. Fenrain hands over the boar meat to the hobbit, ignoring him as he complained further and gave a useless copper ring as payment. Celandine, though, thanks him graciously, and begins brewing the tea. Here, we also reach level 5 and gain a unique title for not having fallen in battle yet, the Wary. This game has an insane amount of titles, each given for tons of different things. I also want to touch on the Warden gameplay right now. I will say I don't think it's my favorite class, but by the end I did find things I liked about it. The Warden is built around something called the Gambit system, which is a kind of combo system, where using a series of skills makes a new combo skill at the end, like a special damaging attack or a heal. The latter is what I found it mostly useful for. Fenrain's ability to heal himself over and over was very useful. Potions and other healing abilities are usually on a long cooldown, but not this one. My main issue with the class, though, is that Fenrain's attacks were so weak compared to other classes. And even when I pulled off a gambit that did more damage, it just didn't feel as good. When I immediately played the Elf Hunter next, the damage difference was just staggering. I think a Warden would be a fantastic member in a group, but solo, aside from the constant healing, was a bit too weak for me personally playing solo through the story. Brackenbrook reads the letter from the farmer, and his face turns pale. He believes us now. He confesses that in the past he'd even chosen Calder Cobb over his own son in arguments. His son, John, is a talented hunter, but he won't swallow his pride to ask him for help. Believing that John wouldn't forgive him, but leave the captain alone to try and plan the defense of the town, and go to speak to Strider. He tells us that we did better than he could have in the situation, which isn't true, and he also tells us the obvious. We'll need to ask John for help anyway. Strider says, though, that now's whenever he must leave, since he's fearful for Frodo, and he believes that Amdir will recover. I do find this strange. I get the idea of not wanting Strider here for the big confrontation. It takes away some element of surprise since we know he'll make it through and will probably win. But it does feel very arbitrary. Not to mention, we literally just saw that the way out of here is barricaded. This is the only truly sloppy part of the prologue story so far, in my opinion, because it's out of character and rather sudden. Before we leave, Celandine finishes brewing her tea and asks us to serve it to Amdir, believing it will make him right as rain. As we do, he confesses he does not think he can drink it, but that he'll pretend to, so that her kindness will not be wasted on him. This is the first and only moment really that humanizes Amdir to me. We didn't have a chance to know him before his wound, but this paints him as a kind, good-hearted ranger like Strider. He looks pale and stops speaking, which makes it even more strange that Strider believes him to be healthy enough. We leave Archet and trek to a hunter's lodge built in a marsh outside of town in search of John. Here we find a real cozy interior, and it's filled with a lot of interesting people, all loyal to John. We speak to him. He does seem a bit of a strange fellow, believing that he saw omens in the darkened sky as well as in men, beasts, and trees. Fenrain could maybe see why Brackenbrook thought his son strange, but regardless, John immediately springs into action and says that he'll defend the town without a second thought. But he needs a bit of time to gather the other warriors and hunters he's befriended. He asks us to infiltrate the ruin the Black Wolves call home, and see if we can find any hints to their plans. Fenrain ventures to the marsh, dipping into the nasty water to sneak into the camp. There he finds some resistance. And though he thought John strange, the sky here does seem darker and fouler. After killing a few of the brigands, he finds correspondence between the enemy, and the words begin to take place in his mind, and with them he feels something light inside of him. The Black Wolves attack tonight, with the help of Angmar. Angmar, his enemies. His trail had been correct. The murderers were assuredly amongst these brigands. He returns to John and shares the plans. They'll be moving through the marsh and down an old path that's now abandoned. That is how they plan to conquer the town and take it unaware. The only one familiar with the path is an old dwarf named Atli Spiderbane. We find him, and also find the path overrun with spiders. If the brigands attack this way, they'll first have to fight the spiders and then be met with a solid palisade wall to breach. We even find a dead brigand scout here, who cannot warn his comrades that the path is dangerous. We return to John, and with the plans secured, knowing the brigands will attack from a foolish direction, we go to town to aid in its defense, night beginning to fall.
John Brackenbrook and his hunters have reached the outskirts of Archet to find it already ablaze. A desperate struggle to save their village is about to begin. Hopefully, you have arrived in time.
We find the town already ablaze. John's hunters hold the old path, and we venture inside. There we find the brigand, who was in the stocks freed, and the jailer on the ground dying as he beats him. As we save him, he tells us the captain and Amdi are at the inn, and passes away from his wounds, a woman coming to mourn him. After many more fights in the streets and killing countless brigands, we find the captain protecting Amdir and the hobbits. As father and son reunite, the captain tries to apologize to his son, and the sky gets darker. We fight off more waves of brigands until eventually, Calder Cobb marches through the streets, and at his side, two creatures cloaked in red robes. Not the Nazgul, but the Kargul, a new lore invention made solely for LOTRO, and one I enjoy. The Kargul are servants of the Witch King, made by Morgul blades. It gives us a very unique enemy to face. They're like the Nazgul, yet not them. Fenrain cowers from the overwhelming sensation of evil, but tries to shield Celandine. The Kargul beckons Amdir towards them, calling him a servant of Mordor. Amdir joins them, calling him master. He has fallen to the Morgul blade. The Kargul leave with their prize, telling Calder to finish the job. Calder kills the captain, a man who viewed him as even better than his son at one point, and we snap from our fear, fighting and defeating Calder and his brigands. Though the captain is dead and Amdir is lost, we're able to save the town and kill off the remaining bandits. The Kargul likely considered this minor importance, a test for their new servant in Calder, and Calder had failed his test.
With the Black Wolves' attack foiled, the people of Archet have begun to rebuild. Yet not all hurts are so easily mended. The fate of the Ranger Amdir remains uncertain and may have dire consequences for Breeland. But hope remains that he may yet be saved.
The town was saved, but Fenrain can't help but feel sad at what has happened, almost as if this was his failure. But despite this feeling, an even brighter one overwhelms the despair. The fire that was within him burns even brighter. He knows that even if he never finds the exact people who he's been tracking since Rohan, he can stop people like them. He had done more for this town than would have happened otherwise if he were not here. Without him, John the Hunters wouldn't have been able to help in time, and more lives would have been lost. It's possible the town could have been completely under the Black Wolves' control, but besides this new enemy, he also refused to leave Amdir to his fate. The aftermath of the fight is so well done. Seeing this town that was once so full of life, desolate and covered in soot and ash is so sad, but also seeing the efforts to rebuild is a good feeling. The entire region also feels changed. Cal's farm is overtaken with spiders, the boars are now diseased and hurting innocents. We can find that Will Wheatley, the young man who declared vengeance, is dead, as well as Dirk, the guard that Calder hid behind earlier. We even get a quest to bury them, a very solemn experience. Fenrain feels worse for not having warned Cal to abandon his vengeance or to warn Dirk of Calder, but he knows that deep down, neither would have listened to him. Fenrain, under Atli's request, tracks down a family member in the spider tunnels, and later kills the spiders and their queen. Annoyingly though, these are 3 separate quests. The amount of quests that send you back and forth the same area that could have been easily done in one go is greatly annoying and a genuine complaint I have with the entire game. This is a common problem with LOTRO's questing that is especially felt in later zones. Since I have a higher level character going through Moria right now, it happens all the time in Moria, and Moria is huge. Anyways, when we return from our wrapping up of the region, John tells us a man that reminded him of Strider came asking for us, and said that he had an urgent request for us, asking him to meet him in nearby Combe at the Combe and Wattle Inn. We thank John for the information and bid him farewell, hoping that the town will be safe in his hands. With Archet behind us, we leave the once barricaded gate and make our way to Combe. And even out here, we feel the effects of the prologue quests, which is a super cool feeling. Everyone is commenting on our victory, in the subsequent flooding of the land with Blackwold remnants. It has encouraged the rest of the region to take those preemptive strikes that Archet didn't, fighting the Blackwolds openly and early. But it's also encouraged others to join up with them, and we get so many side quests dealing with this. Finding, for instance, a son who has joined the Blackwolds, whose mother's trying to convince him to leave, or townsfolk who are already fed up with the thieves and ask us to hunt them down and return their heirlooms. In Combe, we meet with the ranger Torridan, sitting moodily alone in an inn room. He explains that he was at the bounds of the Shire at Sarn Ford, but he and many rangers were driven back and some killed. Funny enough, another game I've covered on the channel, War in the North, starts with this event. In fact, both LOTRO and War in the North have very similar main quests, dealing with Angmar in the North and a proxy of the Witch King. Torridan after Sarn Ford went looking for Amdir to aid him and Strider, but learned Amdir is gravely wounded. And since Strider is busy being Strider, Torridan asks us to try and find Amdir with him. He believes the Blackwolds hold him, and maybe he can still be saved. We find out that there is still a Blackwold agent hiding somewhere in town. Those holed up in the woods can at least be openly dealt with, but a possible spy is harder. After doing some questing in the area and finding letters from the Blackwolds, we learn that a woman named Ellie Cutleaf, a dog trainer, is the spy, and she was recruiting Blackwolds. We try to pose as an outlaw wishing to join, but when we meet her, she openly dismisses us, saying that she won't work for the bandits anymore. She helped the Blackwolds breed wolves, the very same ones that we fought back in the prologue, but now regrets it. And again, it's super cool to have things continually tied back to what happened in the prologue. With her advice, we find and kill the Den Mother, who is producing half-warg, half-wolf offspring, and eventually sneak into the main Blackwold stronghold to poison the already produced wolves, and kill their trainer, Jagger Jack. And there, beside Jack, Fenrain sees Angmaran men, their banner even flown by the bandits. He slays them all. His enemy is clear, and he will not rest until the Blackwolds and Angmar both, as a whole, are destroyed. Though Ellie has flipped, the Blackwolds don't know that yet, and she arranges for us to meet with the Blackwold leader Skunkwood, posing as a new recruit. And not only that, in her meetings with them, she found that Amdir is being spoken about by the bandits. We return quickly to Torridan with the news. We may be able to save Amdir, and Fenrain realizes he may also be able to kill Skunkwood, cutting off the chain of command for the Blackwolds. But there is another still above Skunkwood, an Angmaran man named Eogan. Eogan. The name almost sounded Rohirric. Could this be the one he was hunting? A traitor to his own people joining Angmar? Torridan sends us on our mission, and we go to the Blackwold hideout, built into a cave at the foot of a waterfall. We tell the Blackwolds we wish to join, and due to Ellie's help, they let us right in. The place is massive, with a mess hall and many beds for the bandits. We reach the lowest depths and find Skunkwood, positioning himself on a throne, flanked on all sides by human bones, wolfhounds, and Angmar banners. He rises and welcomes us almost kindly, though Fenrain is not built for deception and tries to hide his gritted teeth as he approaches. Fenrain says he has heard word that there is a prize taken from Archet, and he would like to see it. Skunkwood seems willing, but warns that Amdir has become strange. And sure enough, as we reach him, Amdir is shouting about the Eye. The Blackwolds around him are frightened and have their weapons drawn. Amdir looks spectral now, his form withered and pale and even transparent? The Nazgul are said to lack physical form, and he must be slowly becoming as they are. He complains about the cold wound, and then magically opens the door to his cell. Knocking Fenrain and the guards dazed, he runs from us. In the cell is a halfling woman named Sarah Oakhart, who asks us to help her. We fight the now risen guards and dispatch them, and lead Sarah Oakhart through the dungeon. Slowly. Now, Sarah is a rather infamous figure in the LOTRO community, and this is why. She's so slow. Ridiculously so. And for minor spoilers, this isn't the only time that we'll encounter her slow ass. We kill the Blackwolds as we go, and partway through, Sarah stops us to insist that she gets her walking stick the Black Wolves stole, following her further away from the exit. And she is so slow. I knew that it was coming, and I still laughed at how silly the moment was, waiting for her walking stick. This dungeon takes 20-ish minutes, and the vast majority of it is spent escorting Sarah. Due to this delay, Skunkwood and his wolfhounds rise to meet us, and Fenrain is more than happy to kill the blackguard and his pets. We find Amdir at the exit of the cave, Toradan there too. Toradan says Amdir is too far gone and must be ended. Amdir feels betrayed. Clearly the words of the eye have gotten to him, screaming about the voice telling the truth, that the Dunedain have no compassion. He draws a sword and slashes Toradan, fleeing the cave, saying he will kill every other ranger too. Toradan coughs up blood, and asks us to find a Dunedain named Mundle in the mustering cave. Sarah, watching this all, speaks to us, seeming strangely informed, saying that Amdir has now fallen to the enemy, due to the blade's work, but not to worry about her now. Toradan passes, and Fenrain leaves the cave, Sarah and him going their separate paths, for now. Fenrain learns of the mustering caves in the marshes to the east, and it is a meeting place for the rangers. In the marshes, Fenrain does some questing, but I'll not fully recount it. For quick synopsis, he kills some goblins and beasts of the marsh, and eventually makes his way to the Dunedain mustering cave, where he meets Mundle, already dying. Amdir got here first. He tells us to seek out yet another Dunedain in a ruin in the center of the marsh. Riniolin was also driven from the Sarn Ford and has been here ever since. Once we tell him what is happening, he says we must go to Bree and meet the chief of the Dunedain, Strider. We follow him through the ruins as he lights the way and kills many spiders. I like the idea that, due to the rising of evil in Mordor, Isengard, and Angmar, other evils of the world have also just begun naturally appearing and surfacing more, like the spiders or even bandits. This idea that evil breeds more evil. In times past, I imagine Riniolin wouldn't have just been chilling 45 feet from giant spiders, but he is a ranger, so maybe he would. When we reach the end of the ruin, Riniolin lights one more torch, and Amdir appears from the dispelled darkness, already waiting for us. Riniolin tries to speak to him, dissuade him, but Amdir quickly stabs the young ranger and turns his fury onto us. Fenrain hates what Amdir has become, but he knows this isn't truly him anymore. Eventually Amdir flees, and a great spider broodmother drops from the ceiling. With the creature dead and Amdir's spectral form hard to follow, Fenrain goes to Reniolin's side. Riniolin says we must go to Strider, and even lets his real name slip, Aragorn. We should speak to Barlaam Butterbur, the innkeeper of the Prancing Pony. He will know where Aragorn is. He's able to give us directions to Bree before he dies. In sorrow, he leaves the cave and enters Bree. Now, I do find the one ranger dying after one ranger dying after one ranger is a bit much. I get the idea of it, but it is a little annoying to just have to sit there and watch Amdir kill them. Bree is a massive town and a welcome sight for Fenrain. It has been a long time since he had seen this many people in a single place. Not since he visited Edoras years ago. Seeing all the people going about their lives working, watchmen with their guard dogs, hobbits and humans haggling, friends and lovers speaking and laughing. Even with the light rainfall, the town felt like such a relief to Fenrain. It surely helped to invigorate him. Due to his victory at Archet, maybe he had even saved Bree from falling, at least for the moment. Bree is the main hub for the early game, and many players can still be seen here, actively, even doing things like performing concerts and role-playing. I have fond memories of Bree and will always love it as an MMO city. Entering the Prancing Pony and relaxing in the warm fire, he finds the innkeeper Butterbur, and asks him where Strider is. The jovial innkeeper directs him to his room, and there Fenrain finds Strider. Fenrain at first almost feels resentment that he was left to deal with Amdir, and Strider could have helped. But Strider has not been absent action, and of course Fenrain can't know the severity and graveness of Strider's task. Strider says he has found a camp to the east of Bree, and it is filled with Black Wolves, Angmarans, and a dwarf lord of the Dourhand dwarves. Here Strider believes Amdir is. It is hard to ignore the gathering of all these forces, so they must investigate regardless. Fenrain had never heard of these Dourhand dwarves. Indeed, the Dourhands belong to different origin stories entirely. The reason these story elements are coming together now is that this quest functions as the meeting point, where race-specific origins end and the main quest for everyone begins. It is very cool to have motivation for us to find Amdir, and also for the other origins to seek out the Dour Hand Lord. Strider leaves us to rest for a moment, but asks us to return soon to seek out Amdir. But Fenrain has no need for rest. Actually, he does, but he can't rest while this is unresolved. And so, with Strider and a small group of rangers, they leave Bree to assault this camp.
Strider and the rangers pursue their fallen brother Amdir to the Blackwolves' camp. But not all is as it seems.
Strider and one ranger will look for the main entrance to the ruin, while Fenrain and another ranger will go through this back entrance. As we approach, we find that the Blackwolves are already fleeing the camp, yelling about a dwarf gone mad. They seem terrified, but as they see us approach, they draw their weapons still and attack, rather than flee or talk. As they venture through the camp, Fenrain slays all the Blackwolves they come across. In his mind, the Blackwolves die for good tonight. Near the center of camp, Fenrain witnesses a terrifying sight. A dwarf torturing Blackwolves on an altar, over half a dozen already mutilated around him, screaming about how service to Angmar does not come without a cost. Seeing us approach, though, the dwarf uses foul magics, and summons plague rats and undead wights to fight us as he retreats. Fenrain, feeling the presence of the dark magics, has the sensation that something greatly evil is watching him, a great eye. It consumes part of his vision, he feels himself becoming weaker, but still he pushes through it, killing these wretched enemies, even while he is weakened. This is an actual mechanic. The eye will sometimes appear and replace the minimap, and your maximum health morale has a chunk of it consumed by the eye. But Fenrain pushes past, and ascends a great stair, finding at the top the Nazgul, gathered around a red-robed figure upon an altar. The Nazgul overwhelms Fenrain and the ranger with their black breath, and tells them Amdir has fully fallen. He is now a Kargul. Before the Nazgul can attack Fenrain, though, an Angmaran man appears, warning that Aragorn approaches with fire. The Nazgul flee and leave the man who they call Eogan to deal with us. Eogan, the leader of the Angmaran here who controlled the Black Wolves. He must die. Fenrain snaps into action against Eogan as Aragorn approaches. Even if Eogan is not the one from Rohan, he must fall. No more evil shall be commanded from his foul mouth, gathering the Black Wolves. He falls to Fenrain's spear, but as he does, the red-robed figure rises. Amdir. He calls himself Kargul. He is fully gone. This is a mercy, Fenrain tells himself, and he is almost relieved that Amdir is now fully gone. With the ranger, they press on with their attacks until the robes fall to the ground, barely a form beneath them, collapsing in on itself. The ranger whispers for Amdir, but Fenrain does not. Amdir has been gone. Nothing remains of him here. With the mission done, they all regroup and leave together, in silence.
The Nazgul have crossed the Eisen and are heading for the Shire. The hobbits must be quick-footed enough to escape the wrath of the Nine. And we can only hope that Frodo slips through the traps of the enemy.
When we return, Aragorn speaks to us, telling us openly that this has grieved him, but he chooses to remember Amdir as he was. Fenrain, now fully in his confidence, is told that the Nazgul have crossed into the Shire, and they must hope that the enemy does not find his halfling charge. But in the meantime, Fenrain can help him further with yet another task. I'm afraid to say, though, that is where our tale in the video ends. The human origin and the first main quest of the game has been completed. Fenrain has avenged his home, he has freed Amdir from his torment, and the Blackwolves lay leaderless, and with time they will fade completely. Fenrain has found purpose here, surprisingly even more than he had back in Rohan. Defending a border was static, but Fenrain has discovered that he is a man who needs action, a hero. And with time he will learn that his home needs his help again. But for the moment, here he has found the purpose that he needed. Either by fate or by his own action. Does the difference truly matter? Fenrain has found a new calling. Angmar must fall. Overall, I like this origin story. I think it's probably the one that ties best into the main quest, since it already gives us an attachment to Aragorn early on, that the other races do not get. Similarly, the Amdir plotline is more compelling than the Dour Hands in my opinion. That being said, I do have some complaints. I wish we had more time with Amdir. I think even switching out Aragorn with Amdir in the opening, and having Amdir be the one to directly save us, would be a greater way to build attachment to him. See how great a person he is before his fall. And again, I think Aragorn leaving is very much out of character, and just weird feeling. And though I compare these origins to Dragon Age origins, the origins in this game do lack a very important thing. There are no story choices. I think overall this is fine. As I said in my opening, this is a game about providing a very specific type of fantasy. So being able to say and make the choice to join the Outlaws wouldn't do. But still, I would like some options, like possibly warning Will back in Archet, or encouraging his vengeance. Lastly, I think Mundo and Celandine should have stuck around in Archet after the prologue, and they actually can be found in the game after the prologue, but all the way back in the Shire. But I would have liked to speak to them in the immediate aftermath, and talk about Amdir's falling and our victory. Celandine especially, since she had grown attached to Amdir.
Did my tea perk him up? I knew it would!
Perhaps this is something that we can follow up on when we do the Hobbit origin. To be more positive, though, the greater connection to Breeland's quests through this origin is fantastic, and you feel as you go through that your origin actually mattered, and influenced the other towns and villages in the region. It also gives you a very personal stake in defeating the Black Wolves, and finding Amdir. The region we start into I enjoy a lot. Getting to see how Bree is maintained through the food of these nearby settlements is very neat, and does tie into the book. Archet and Combe are both mentioned in the books. And funny enough, Archet in the books is a town that is said to have ruffians in the woods, during the War of the Ring and the Scouring of the Shire. So it is a perfect plot thread to follow through in a video game's questline. This game in general is excellent about taking the smallest things in the books, and twisting them into new and engaging stories, sometimes something that's mentioned once. I also want to say to keep in mind that this entire human origin story has taken place in only one zone so far, and only about a third of it. Look at this map of Breeland. So far we have only touched Archet, Shetwood, Combe, Midwater Marshes, and Bree on this zone map, skipping many quests in some of the areas. And here's the crazy part. By my count, using the wiki, there are around 52 zones of this size in the game, each with many smaller zones inside of them. If you are a Lord of the Rings fan, you are seriously missing out by not exploring this game. The majority of Middle-earth is explorable here, from Gondor to Rohan to Mordor itself, and even the places barely touched upon in the books, like the frozen wastes of Foroshel or the southeastern lands of Harad. For more general review things, the UI in this game has aged very poorly. The text is stupidly small, especially in dialogue. Luckily, the game does allow for repositioning of UI elements, but they remain kind of ugly, and the text never gets better. The big ugly LOTRO store always being present is annoying as well, though I will say actually that the store itself isn't that bad. The devs often give out free expansions, and the premium currency can be earned by playing the game consistently. I've earned enough of the premium currency just by playing the game to buy an entire expansion and several quest packs, as well as character slots, before without spending a single dollar. The main way to earn these is that while exploring the world, you get deeds. The great thing is, these deeds are usually things that you're already going to be doing. For instance, let's say that you kill a wolf in a region. You will usually get a deed to kill, say, 30 wolves in that region. When you kill those 30 wolves, you earn the premium currency, and usually unlock another tier of deed 2 to kill, say, 60 wolves. Grinding isn't something I usually like, but something about LOTRO's grinding makes it feel worthwhile and fun. I like seeing number go up. I hope this video has encouraged people to try out LOTRO, and see what the rest of the main story is, and to craft their own character. I think there are some great stories to be found here. If you do decide to play it, the server that I play on mostly is Peregrine, which is an RP server, though RP isn't enforced, it just means that it's encouraged, so feel free to join. People have chats in the world chat all the time, you'll find many fun events. People are usually very friendly. If you ask for help, sometimes you'll get people who will travel across the entire map. In general, LOTRO's community has been great. I've had some weirdos in the world chat, that's kind of the case for every MMO. Overall though, great community, recommend it. Anyways, this is it for the first origin in LOTRO. I like the human Breeland start, but I'm excited to talk about the other ones in the near future, as they veer off into more fantastic, and honestly in my opinion, better territory. While I think this is the best tie-in to the main quest, I think the other origins have better gameplay and standalone stories. There's also an origin I've never tried before, a very recent expansion actually called Before the Shadow that I'll be touching on last. Anyways, hopefully you're down to hear me talk about all of these in the future too. Thank you, everyone, for watching, and especially to my two patrons, Fred Greisen and Mateo Feo, both on the Kindred-centric tier. You both are beyond generous and a big encouragement for me to keep making these videos. It means a lot, and it makes me feel these videos are literally worth something to some people out there. On Patreon, I have some exclusive videos and early script previews and things like that, so if any of you are interested, go on there. You'll also be thanked at the end of the video. I will be putting out some more general reviews on the channel soon, although I will eventually return to LOTRO and Morrowind. That's coming soon. No for sure timeline on when, but I'm always working on something, so stick around. As a final thank you, LOTRO Archive, a channel here on YouTube, graciously allowed me to use some of their footage for this video, namely for regions like Rohan, which are levels and levels above where I'm currently at. So that was very kind and helpful for making the video. So check out their channel if you want to see some LOTRO content and walkarounds. I think it's actually a very useful channel, especially if LOTRO ever does sadly go away. They have archived much of the game. Anyways, this has been your resident eccentric, and I will see you again. Farewell.
A little bird told me that you've been asking around town about a resident eccentric. I'd like to know why.